right, so a lot of fans of the show recently have been giving us input on segments they want to see us cover, topics they want to see us cover, and a lot of people have been saying they want to see us do an NFL first-round mock draft. So here we are. What a great idea, considering the draft is this week, so very timely. So basically the way this is going to work is we're going to go through every pick of the first round. We're not going to do trades. We don't want to overcomplicate it. And each of us has been given a handful of teams. And we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals, and we're going to go to our resident Bengals fan, Pastel. Pastel, are you going to screw this up? Is there any surprises in store, or are we going with the future quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals here?
Justin Herbert. No, I'm joking. It's got to be Joe Burrow, right? It's got to be Joe Burrow. Born, raised in Ohio, from Ohio State, and then went to LSU, transferred to LSU. He's 6'3", 220 pounds, and he's everything you want in a prospect. I mean, as far as his pocket presence, I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback prospect in the last probably 2 decades come out with this type of potential. His feel for the pocket, his anticipation when he throws the ball. I say that knowing that we drafted Carson Palmer. I know Andrew Luck was out there. The only thing he lacks is elite arm strength. But in the NFL, I'd rather have accuracy and anticipation over that strength any day. It's a slam dunk pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, and I am going to be so excited when they announce his name next Thursday.
Does it concern you that he only had that one, obviously it was a historic year at LSU, but does it concern you that he only had that 1 year?
Yes, it does concern me a little bit because he couldn't beat out the people like Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State, so he had to transfer, and he didn't play to that elite level until Joe Brady got there at LSU. So I am a little curious to see if the coaching had a lot of influence on him, but some of those things you just can't teach. Right. Like I said, like that pocket presence and the fact that he always had 2 hands on the ball. We see a lot of guys when they scramble, they kind of lose that. He just had an incredible feel within that pocket. So it does worry me a little bit, but not enough to not pick him number 1. I think he is definitely a franchise quarterback in this draft.
You mentioned Dwayne Haskins. What a nice segue to our number 2 pick.
That's right.
Glessner, the Washington Redskins are on the clock. Do you see them trading out of this pick potentially? If they stay in this pick, who do you see them taking?
Yeah, a couple different scenarios here. I think that they'd really have to be wowed with an offer in order to move out of this pick. A lot of word about Miami possibly shifting a couple of their first rounders to get down to 2. But ultimately, I think they stick here, and the pick here is no shock. Even though that they could go in a couple of different directions. They could go O-line. They could go wide receiver. They could really shock the world and pick up a quarterback here. I don't think they do any of that. I think they go with the logic pick of the best overall player in this draft, and that's Chase Young. And he, potentially probably the best edge rushing prospect that we've seen in probably the last decade to 15 years. A lot of comparisons to Javon Curse. A lot of people think that he could be the next big LT, a defensive prospect. Guys, prototypical 4-3 defensive end, incredible speed. His first step is really unmatched. We haven't seen a first step like this out of an edge rusher in a long, long time. Extremely productive player in college. He's got tons of tons of different moves, and he's really going to make quarterback a lot of nightmares for quarterbacks in the NFC East. When you talk about Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones, they're going to be seeing a lot of number 2. I can tell you that. This is a home run pick, and really a pick for Ron Rivera to kind of change that culture where last couple of years they've drafted a lot of defense, but they haven't really had any dominating defensive players. Mm-hmm. Good defensive players, but not dominating. Chase Young is a franchise changer, in my opinion.
Yeah, and most mocks you've seen have had him going here. I think it's a very predictable pick. I would be shocked if I could see him trading out of it, but if they do anything else in terms of picking another player in that spot, I'd be a little shocked. Let's go to number 3 in the Lions. This is where things start to get dicey. But if the Lions do pick here, Kenny, who do you see him taking? But this is a spot where a lot of people are speculating a trade to happen.
Yeah, so I flip-flopped and really was 50-50 on who I wanted to take. And then we kind of laid out the parameters of how we were going to do the mock draft, which is this mock draft is based on who we would take if we were the GM of these teams, not who we think they're going to take. So for me, I went with Jeffrey Okudah. And the reason being is there's 4 elite positions in the NFL. You have quarterback, left tackle, rush edge, and cornerback. And so I was flipping between Okudah and Derek Brown, and Okudah won out in the end. I mean, the guy's 6'1", 200. He has tremendous size for a cornerback. He plays like he's 5'9", 5'10" with the way he moves. And he's more of your traditional cover corner. Like if you watch a lot of his highlight film, he's on people like a blanket. Like he's not a guy who's going to take a gamble and get burnt. He's a guy who's just locked on all the time. So he had 9 pass deflections this year. He had 3 picks. He was a consensus All-American. He's a guy who's gonna be, a Champ Bailey type corner for the next 10 years for the Detroit Lions. I think it's an easy pick. Cornerback Jeffrey Okudah, Detroit Lions number 3.
And they have to replace Darius Slay. So there is, even though you're taking the best probably player on the board there, debatably, it's a position of need too for the Lions. So let's go ahead and move to number 4. Pastel, you're back up with the Giants. What do you see the Giants doing here?
I mean, we're talking kind of constant theme. These first 4 or 5 athletes on the NFL draft, these are prospects that you usually don't see making it past 2. So Isaiah Simmons, 6'4", 240-pound linebacker or safety, depending on what the team actually needs. He's kind of like if you had to make a Von Miller and a Sean Taylor like hybrid, this is what you get. You get an Isaiah Simmons. He ran a 4.39 at the combine, and he ended this past year with 104 tackles, 7 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 3 interceptions. I mean, he does everything. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I can put him anywhere on the field. He can just cause disruption. You can't find athletes like that on defense in drafts at the number 4 spot in rarely any draft. So I'm extremely excited for the Giants to pick up an athlete like Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah, it's a solid pick. He's an athletic freak, and the Giants' defense will be well suited to have him. All right, let's go to the big one. The Dolphins. I'm up. Okay. Number 5. I'm freaking out. Why am I so nervous? This is a mock draft. So there's been a lot of speculation around this pick. Obviously, there's also been a lot of trade talk. So we'll see if the Dolphins stay at 5, and we'll see who's on the board at 5. If somebody jumps them and tries to take Tua or Herbert, it obviously makes the Dolphins' choice a little bit easier. I see them taking a quarterback here no matter what. But I will be very upset if the Dolphins come on the board like it is right now, and Tua is there and Herbert is there, and they pass on Tua. I don't care about the injury history. I don't care about the Wonderlic tests. Yeah, I know he scored a 13. That's really low. It is a little concerning, but he also took 2 tests, and one he scored a 19, and I think the average for a usual quarterback is 20. So he was, the second time he took it, it was right around there. But anyways, the last time the Miami Dolphins passed on a player for injury purposes of this magnitude, they passed on Drew Brees for Dante Culpepper, and it completely derailed the franchise for a decade, at least a decade, over a decade. Don't make the same mistake, Miami Dolphins. I don't care if it's a little bit of a chance. His ceiling is so much higher than Justin Herbert that I would much rather you take a chance on Tua and him not work out than play it safe and, draft Justin Herbert and him turn into another Ryan Tannehill. Now, I think he's a better pure passer than Ryan Tannehill, but he's just not that guy that, really excites you bringing him into your franchise, and I'm sick and tired of the Dolphins taking guys like that. Ryan Tannehill, John Beck, in the second round where everyone hyped him up in terms of Dolphins fans. I'm done with it. Take Tua and be done with it. So I'm taking Tua Tagovailoa, number 5 for the Miami Dolphins. So let's go to number 6 and the Chargers. Kenny, do you think now that Tua's off the board, are they going to take Justin Herbert, or are they going in a different direction? Because they need a quarterback as well.
So I had them going in a different direction. My original pick was going to be Tua, and then when you selected him at 5, it brought him off the board. And me personally, I don't think Justin Herbert or any other quarterback is worth a top 10 pick. So I went with my top defensive player on the board that's left, and that's Derek Brown, defensive tackle from Auburn. Derek Brown is a stud. I mean, the guy single-handedly dominated games at Auburn. He's 6'5", 318. He's had 21 and a half tackles for loss the past 2 years, 33 overall for his career. As an interior defensive lineman, that's huge. I've seen a lot of comparisons. Daniel Jeremiah compared him to Ndamukong Suh. He's one of the top-rated defensive tackles to come out in the last 5-10 years. I don't think he's quite on that Aaron Donald level, but I think this is a guy you put in the interior of a defensive line, especially with a guy like Joey Bosa, who's there in San Diego. He's gonna be absolutely incredible to watch those two pair up and just dominate. Because you think about, you've got Derek Carr and Pat Mahomes out there in the West, and now Drew Lock as well. You've got to get after the quarterbacks. You've got to disrupt them. Those guys are elite quarterbacks. So you get Bosa and pair Derek Brown in there and have them come up to the quarterback. I think it's an absolute game changer for what's already a really, really good defense and a really, really good team.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to number 7, the Carolina Panthers. Gless, that's one of your teams. Who do you think Carolina should take here in the 7th spot?
Yeah, could have gone a couple different directions here. Could have gone D-line, could have gone interior O-line. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I take a look at that division, and I look at Matt Ryan, I look at now Tom Brady, and I look at Drew Brees. And this team needs secondary help bad. So I went and took the second best corner in this draft, C.J. Henderson out of Florida. He actually came out early as a junior this year. A couple big things to note about him. He's extremely skilled and extremely athletic corner, and he's really known for covering guys man to man. It's not a great zone corner, but he's an incredible man technique corner. Great hands, very long, has great instincts. So I think he's going to be a great fit for Carolina and really fit the back end of that defense and what they're going to need to do, because I think that division, if you look at it, is just nothing but teams that score a lot of points and nobody really plays defense. So you need a corner that can match up with number ones all around that league. I think C.J. Henderson's a no-brainer pick for the Panthers right here.
Yeah, I think if for some reason the Chargers take Herbert or Tua, if they take a quarterback and Derek Brown falls, I could see him going here as well. But yeah, that's a good pick, Les. So I'm back up with the Cardinals, and I think the pick they need to make here is pretty clear. 2 years ago, they were the worst offensive line in NFL history. They were a little bit better this past year, but they need to improve. They re-signed their left tackle, DJ Humphries, this offseason, but they need some help on the right side. So I think, it's a pretty strong, at the top end, in my opinion, of a tackle class. I think there's 4 guys that you could see going within the first 15 to 20 picks of this draft. So I'm going to take Jedrick Wills here, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. Big, dominant, specializes in run blocking, but he has really good movement. I think he can anchor that right tackle spot and help protect Kyler Murray. So that really gives you good anchors on both sides of your offensive line. So I have them going offensive tackle here, whether it's Wills or Wirfs from Iowa. I think they need to go offensive tackle here. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's move on to who we got? Jacksonville.
Oh,
Kenny.
Come on, Riley. The Jags, baby. Let's go.
I had to go back to my
football
list.
Team?
Yeah. I thought they relocated.
Yeah.
Aren't they in
We're
London
about
now?
to relocate to we're about to relocate
London
to London,
Jaguars.
No, so Riley, I thought it was great that you mentioned Tristan Wirfs. So for the Jags, the Jags could go a lot of different directions. I think for them, they're drafting best player available. They're clearly in a full build. They've shed a ton of contracts. They've traded a lot of players away, and they're still not done. So they could go any direction. But for me, my top prospect on the board is Tristan Wirfs. I think he's the top offensive tackle in the draft this year, and so. What I think is uniquely interesting about him is he was a Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, which says something because the league is known for offensive line. So not only does he have the production to go with it, but guys, and I'm not a big scouting combine workout warrior type of guy, but listen to these numbers. He at 6'5", 320, he ran a 4.85 40. He had a 10'1" broad jump, a 7'6'5" 3-cone drill, and then had a 36-inch or 36.5-inch vertical leap. Like, the guy has athleticism out the wazoo to match the production that he had in college. I mean, he reminds me of Jason Peters, the former Philadelphia Eagles left tackle. Like, just an absolute athletic freak who, if he puts it all together at the next level, will be a Pro Bowl left tackle for the next 10 to 12 years. Easy.
So 2 tackles off the board. Are we going to do 3? What is Cleveland going to do here, Pastel, at the number 10 pick?
We're going offensive tackle. There's a run on tackles. And there's only so many top end ones. So when you have a run like that, you almost have to pick one if you have a need for it. So I think Cleveland Browns, they go Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle from the University of Georgia. He's 6'5", a little underweight, 319 pounds. But if you look at the Cleveland Browns, they got these Odell Beckhams, these Jones. They beefed up their skill position, and then Joe Thomas, Kevin Zeitler, their line, when they used to have a really good offensive line, they went away, and the team has just kind of been stagnant. So I think you got to get somebody there to protect Baker Mayfield, solidify that offensive line. And I think with Andrew Thomas, he might be one of the safest picks in the draft. I think his ceiling is okay. I don't think his floor is that low, though. I think he's played 3 years of SEC football. Like, you can see what he's done against elite defenses, and he's done well. There's a reason why Swift is one of the best running backs in this draft. It's because he's kind of set that edge for him. So I think Andrew Thomas is a good pick for Cleveland. He's a safe pick for Cleveland. And honestly, every offensive tackle after this that we talk about, I think you got a lot more risk involved with them.
Yeah. A lot of people had Mekhi Becton going, in the top 3 of offensive tackles, but I wonder how much he'll fall with the recent news of him failing a drug test. I wonder if that's going to affect things at all in terms of his draft stock. I'm a little surprised that Andrew Thomas went this high. I think, potential is there, but I think he's a little raw compared to some of the other guys. But yeah, if they choose to pass on Becton, then Andrew Thomas would be a good pick here. So let's go ahead and move on to number 11. Gless, you have the New York Jets. What do you think the Jets are going to do here at 11?
Yeah, with the run of tackles, it was very tempting to add a fourth one here, but I really liked Andrew Thomas as well. So when I saw him come off the board, I said, all right, I'm not sure. I really like a lot of the other ones more than I like Thomas. So I went ahead and I looked at the draft board, and this one clearly stuck out to me because as far as all the positions in the draft, wide receiver, in my opinion, is so freaking stacked from, the top 6 guys that you could possibly take. It's probably one of the best receiver drafts we've seen in a long, long time. So I'm going to take, in my opinion, the number 1 receiver in this class, and that's Jerry Jeudy out of Alabama. I absolutely love this kid. I've watched him the last 2 years at Alabama, and the kid is super dynamic. A little bit different than kind of your traditional Alabama receiver, your Julio Jones style kind of receiver. A little bit smaller, he's about 6 foot. But I think Sam Darnold needs a clear number 1 game breaker, and the value here at 11 is just too much to pass up. I look at him and reminds me a lot of Amari Cooper, I would think, is a pretty good pro comparison now. His breakaway speed, his jukes, his body awareness, and the way he can just track the ball in, I think just makes him an absolute complete receiver. You can put him in the slot sometimes if you want. So I think this is a no-brainer here. I think this is a guy, Sam Darnold, now gets his true number 1 receiver, and they can grow together and really try to become a big-time offense there in New York.
All right, so we have our first receiver off the board. Let's go ahead and move on to the Raiders. Kenny, I know receivers another need that the Raiders have, but they also have a lot of other needs. What do you think the Raiders are going to do here?
So I have the Raiders taking Javon Kinlaw, who I think is probably the second best defensive tackle on the board right now in this draft. And so what I like about Javon Kinlaw is, and I'm a big production guy, I think production translates to the next level a lot of times. And if you look at his numbers, you probably look at it and go, well, he doesn't have a lot of tackles for loss, he doesn't have a lot of sacks, but so why are you so high on this guy? If you go back and look at his film, a lot of that is because he's easily double teamed, the only double teamable candidate on the South Carolina defensive line. But then you go back and watch the Senior Bowl practices, and he absolutely dominated all the practices when he was out in the field. An absolute stud. And then you look at his frame, he's 6'6", 310. He still has room to grow and put on weight organically when he gets to the NFL. By the time he gets a season or 2 in, he could be 6'6", 325 and still be just as productive as he's 6'6", 310. I think there's a lot of upside, a lot of potential for Kinlaw to really develop at the next level, get in a good weight program, and really become kind of that all-pro caliber defensive tackle we think he could be.
So I have San Francisco at 13. And I think that you're going to see, whether it starts with the Jets or the Raiders or the 49ers, I think you're going to start to see a run of the wide receivers that we've talked about this class a lot so far. I think you're going to start to see the run here. I don't think CeeDee Lamb is going to be here to take. I think that the Raiders could take him, or even the Jets. But if he is on the board, I'm taking CD Lamb. He's drawing comparisons to DeAndre Hopkins. He's a big, physical, great body control. He goes up to the point of attack. He catches the ball over a lot of times smaller defenders. He's really aggressive in terms of going and getting after the ball. So I think he'd be a perfect pick here to go along with Kittle. I mean, can you imagine then Samuel after his Deebo Samuel after his rookie year? That would be a formidable passing attack, and they have to replace Emmanuel Sanders, who departed for New Orleans, I believe. So I see the 49ers taking a receiver here, whether it's CD Lamb, whether it's Jerry Jeudy, or even Henry Ruggs. They could use a burner to replace Emmanuel Sanders, and Ruggs is pretty fast. I think he's going to go here pretty quickly if he's still on the board here in the next couple of picks. So let's go ahead and move on. We're going to go to Tampa, and Pastel, you're back up. And what do you have Tampa doing with the 14th pick?
Well, when you have a commodity like Tom Brady as your quarterback, you need someone to help him stay healthy and stay upright, right? So the best tackle that I see left on the board is Josh Jones from the University of Houston. He's 6'5", 25 pounds. He is one of those guys that I'd say that at this point, you're kind of getting a risk versus reward type of tackle. So he has a really high ceiling. If you watch some of his game tape, there's some games, I think versus Oklahoma was one of them, he looked like a top 5 pick. And then you look at other games, you're like, where is he at? Where's his motor? He's not showing up every game. So hopefully somebody like Tom Brady, a natural leader, not only on the field but off the field, can get a guy like that into the weight room and kind of like coach him up to be one of those guys that can meet his potential just through the offseason workout program.
Yeah, so Mekhi Becton's still on the board here. We'll see how he falls in our draft. It'll be interesting to see where he goes day one. But Josh Jones, another one of those tackles, debatably right in that top 4, maybe 5 offensive tackles in this year's class. But yeah, Pastor, I mean, they got to protect Tom Brady, especially at his brittle old age. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and move on. We're going to Glessner out in Denver. What's Denver going to do, Gless?
Denver. Yeah, this one, a couple different needs. Offensive tackle and corner being the big, 2 of the 3 biggest needs. But again, the value here is just too great. I'm going to go with Henry Ruggs, the third out of Alabama. We talk about a guy with speed. This guy is the fastest guy in the draft. Reminds me a lot of Tyreek Hill, and really gives Drew Lock that speed down the field that they need in order to really take a top off the defense. So going to be a really nice weapon for Denver to have. It'll be very interesting to see how they utilize him, because you have a guy in Kansas City and Andy Reid who's really a skilled master at understanding how to use different players like a Henry Ruggs, because he uses like with Tyreek Hill, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how Vic Fangio, Pat Shurmur, and Drew Lock really are able to utilize Henry Ruggs. But from a skill set perspective, his speed is unmatched in this draft, and that's what you get with him. So pretty flexible. You can put him out wide. If you put him in the slot, he's going to be a matchup nightmare. So I think it's a great pick for Denver, and it's going to be a good fit as well.
Certainly hope that this scenario does not take shape, because I would love one of the top 3 receivers to fall to Miami at 18. But he's off. They're all gone now, off the board. Let's go to number 16, the Atlanta Falcons. Kenny, who do you have Atlanta taking here?
I have Atlanta taking Christian Fulton, and it really came down to a decision between Christian Fulton and A.J. Terrell from Clemson on who I was going to take. And ultimately, I decided to go with the cornerback from DBU, LSU. So the biggest thing is he's 6'1", 200. He has great size for a corner. And honestly, the reason he's not talked about in that upper echelon of elite prospects is he's a little stiff. He plays a little stiff. He's not quite as athletic as someone as Jeffrey Okudah is for their size. So that is a little concerning at the next level. But the guy has a natural instinct for breaking up passes. He had 14 passes defended this year. He had a pick. He was on an elite defense. A national championship winning defense. He anchored it as the number 1 corner, and really is just a great prospect. He's not quite elite. He's good, but overall, I think he's a very safe pick for the Falcons at 16. He can upgrade that defense and really be a kind of a lockdown corner. And Gless mentioned it earlier, that division with Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, there's a lot of talent. Mike Evans, there's a lot of offensive wide receiver talent in that division. And so for them to get someone who could help lock down those guys would be a huge get for the Falcons at 16.
Yeah, and at 17, I have the Dallas Cowboys, and they are in desperate need of help in the secondary. I was actually targeting Fulton. Obviously, Okudah's going to be long gone by then. After Okudah, it's pretty much like you said, Kenny. It's Okudah and then everybody else. You can kind of debate your preference from there. A.J. Terrell's on the board. I took Trevon Diggs. I'm not crazy about the value here. I know that they need to take a cornerback, but I think if I'm the Cowboys, and this is kind of how the board falls, I'm going to try to trade back a little bit and maybe get another one of those cornerbacks and pick up a pick maybe in a second or third round. If someone is trying to move up, possibly to get a Jordan Love or something like that, if they really want to go grab the last of the big four quarterbacks. So if I'm Dallas, I'm kind of looking at that. But Trevon Diggs, they need to replace Byron Jones, and he reminds me a little bit of Byron Jones. He's a big, physical, kind of in-your-face cornerback. He doesn't have that top-end speed, so he can get burnt sometimes if he plays over-aggressive, which he tended to do at Alabama. But in that defense, you're kind of given the freedom to play aggressive with all the talent that's around you. But there's a couple different options they could do here. They could go safety, but they really need to replace Byron Jones at cornerback, and I see them taking a cornerback here, and I had them taking Trevon Diggs. All right, Pastel, you have Miami. Don't screw this up. This is a very important pick for us.
Oh, no. This is so great.
Who do you have Miami taking here at number 18?
DeAndre Swift, running back, University of Georgia. I know people are going to be like, oh, no, don't draft a running back that high. Here's my thinking. There's 2 running backs, maybe 3 if you want to include Taylor, in this draft that are worth the first-round pick, and that's J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, and Taylor from Wisconsin. But when you get somebody like him, you can't teach the vision that DeAndre Swift has. The way that he can navigate his way within the hashes, running backs, you can't teach that. So I think he's one of those running backs that you got to pick in the first round. And why not? If you're the Miami Dolphins, you have 3 first-round picks. Take one of the best quarterback prospects to come through in Tua. Take the best running back in the draft in Swift. And then go ahead and get somebody else here and a few more picks. But that would overall make their draft instant starters coming out of the first round to play next year. I think it's a home run pick. Riley, what do you think?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the reach of the draft.
Like you said, Pastel, the Dolphins have 3 first-round draft picks. I do not think Swift is going to be off the board by the time the Dolphins come to pick at 26. I think this is a massive reach. The Miami Dolphins have so many needs, and Mekhi Becton is still on the board. Okay? If Mekhi Becton, I don't care if he failed a drug test. We obviously didn't care with Laramie Tunsil, and he worked out okay until we shipped him off to Houston. You have to take an offensive tackle here, in my opinion, especially if you get Tua at 5. The offensive line for the Dolphins was not good. They've retooled it this offseason, so it is a little bit better, but they need – I wouldn't be surprised, guys, if they take 2 offensive tackles in the first round of this draft, at least in the first couple of rounds, because they have 2 second-round draft picks. You take Mekhi Becton here if he's on the board. I know that DeAndre Swift is a very talented running back, but I think you'll have your pick if you have to get a running back in the first round, which I'm not in agreement of, but I don't agree with that. But if you're going to take a first-round running back, Dobbins or Swift will be there. One of them at least at 26. Yeah. I don't see both of them being gone. So at 18 here, you got to go offensive tackle, in my opinion. Maybe safety. They need a little more help to shore up the secondary. But they need an offensive tackle to protect young Tua, who we know about his injury history. So terrible pick by you, Pastel. Let's go ahead and move on to the Las Vegas. I'm just glad you're not our GM. I'll say that. Let's go ahead and move.
We'll see you next Thursday.
Let's go ahead and move to the
Jeff Ireland Jr.
Jeff Ireland Jr. over here. Old Tannenbaum.
Oh, God.
All right, let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders, Gless. What do you see them doing? Kenny had them taking a D tackle. You have to go receiver here, right?
You would think so, but I'm going to give one scenario for our viewers out there that could possibly happen here. Kenny at 6 with the Chargers did not take a quarterback. I could see the Chargers moving up from the second round, putting a package together, possibly trading up. And could you get a Justin Herbert or a Bryce Love at this spot at 18? Possibly, right?
Jordan
You'd be
Love.
able to trade. I'm sorry, Jordan Love. Or could somebody, or or like the Chargers go up and trade with Derek Carr or with the Raiders to get a Derek Carr or get a Marcus Mariota to get a starter because they didn't get Tua, which is exactly who they wanted. If that happens, I could see Love or Herbert come off the board here to the Raiders. Only in that scenario, though. I don't think that happens. So I'm going to go T. Higgins. I don't think – yeah, so I'm going to go T. Higgins here, receiver out of Clemson.
Love you some T. Higgins.
I do. I do. He's out of the top 4 or 5 guys, he's the only receiver of his type, right? He's about 6'4", 220. Really, guys, he is a vertical threat. That's what he does. He gets down the field. There's been a lot of questions about his route running flexibility, right? Like he doesn't really go over the middle a lot. He doesn't run a lot of shallow intermediate routes because he's a vertical home run threat. Great red zone option. I think this is a match made in heaven for Derek Carr. They need receivers bad. They need game changers in the passing game bad. And T. Higgins fits that and checks off all the boxes for them. So I think this is a home run pick. And I wouldn't be surprised, guys, if out of all of these receivers, T. Higgins isn't the one that's most impactful when we look back on this draft.
Yeah, big-time wide receiver. Like we've said, it's a deep wide receiver class, especially at the top end. There could be a lot of wide receivers taken in the first couple rounds here. So let's go ahead and move to Jacksonville. Kenny, you get to pick for your Jaguars again. This is kind of BS. I get 3 first-round picks for the Dolphins, and I only get to pick the 5th pick. Who came up with this order? Pastel. I think Pastel's just trying to screw with me here.
DeAndre Swift, baby.
Oh, my God.
All right, Kenny, who's Jacksonville taking with number 20?
So I had it took a lot of time to think about this because I wasn't exactly sure. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they could go a multitude of directions, and I'm going in a direction that maybe most people think they might not go. So I picked quarterback Jordan Love here. So, and I think a lot of people might be surprised,
Wow.
oh, you took him over Justin Herbert. But to me, in my opinion, Jordan Love is the 3rd best quarterback prospect in this draft. And I know a lot of people are going to talk about, oh, his stats regressed from last year to this year. But listen, you got to remember, Utah State was arguably the best G5 team, not last year, but the year before, when he had an amazing season. They went 11-2 and were absolutely phenomenal. But then so he had a lot of expectations going into this year. But you got to remember, he lost his entire coaching staff. Matt Wells and the entire coaching staff left to go to Texas Tech. And on top of that, he was the only starter to return for that team on offense. They lost 10 offensive starters. Jordan Love was literally the only starter to return. That's just a lot of turnover for anybody. I don't care who you are, what kind of you are. That's not a recipe for success. So for his stats to regress the way they did doesn't really concern me that much because he was basically a one-man army this year. If you look at the film, the guy has all the skill sets to make it in the NFL. He's 6'4", 225. He makes throws that make you salivate and just go, wow. The only thing I would like to see from him is a little bit more consistency. Sometimes he does make some head-scratching throws. I think he trusts his arm a little too much, but that is something you can coach at the next level. I think, and people are like, well, you have Gardner Minshew. Why would you take a quarterback? You don't pass on a franchise quarterback. So if Gardner Minshew beats him out and is the guy, great. If Jordan Love beats out Gardner Minshew and is the guy, even better. Like, it's a win-win situation. I think this is a perfect spot for Jordan Love to go and a perfect spot for him to compete for a starting job.
All right, so let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles at number 21. I have the Eagles, and I think this, Gless, you mentioned match made in heaven earlier. I think this is a match made in heaven. I think they're definitely going to go receiver here. Between Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, and Aguilar, they missed a combined 24 games last year.
It was bad.
Couldn't stay healthy. It was a rough situation for the wide receiver core of the Philadelphia Eagles. So they need to bolster up the depth there. And who better to do that than Justin Jefferson, wide receiver out of LSU. The big knock on him is he wasn't really a burner. And he's still not a burner, but he ran a respectable 4.43 40-yard dash at the combine. It was a lot faster than people thought. So I think that eased a lot of people's concerns with him. He had 18 touchdowns and over 1,500 yards last year with LSU. He's one of those guys, great with ball, in terms of body control, great hands. That's really the strength of Justin Jefferson is his hands, and he's a great route runner. Like I said, he's not a burner, but he's going to be that guy that you can rely on to if Carson Wentz is throwing the ball up, Justin Jefferson's going to be the one to come down with it. So if it's not Justin Jefferson, it's going to be another wide receiver. But I think of the picks that are still on the board, of the players that are still on the board here, Justin Jefferson is your best bet for the Eagles at 21. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the number 22 pick, and we have Minnesota and Pastel. You are back up, sir.
Yep. So A.J. Terrell, cornerback, Clemson. He's probably one of the most safest picks in this draft, a plug-and-play starter. If you look at his career in Clemson, he had one of the most consistent careers all the way into the very last game of his career when he played LSU in the championship, and it was like, oh, man, he could have been a top 15 pick if it wasn't for that film, which makes you question the rest of this film because he played against ACC talent, ACC teams compared to the SEC and other conferences that have been up a lot more than ACC recently. But you look at Minnesota in that need, they got rid of Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander to the Cincinnati Bengals this past offseason. So they have their cornerback position is decimated. So they need a plug-and-play guy, and I think A.J. Terrell fits that bill perfectly.
Yeah, they definitely need some help to shore up the secondary. He was another guy I was debating for the Cowboys earlier in the draft. Depending on your preference, you could have gone with him. But, yeah, he's a pretty safe pick, outstanding during his time at Clemson. Let's go ahead and move to number 23. Gless, you have the New England Patriots up. And in case everyone didn't notice, Justin Herbert's still on the board. I guess it's pretty obvious at this point that this show's not huge fans of Justin Herbert overall. But Gless, if Justin Herbert falls this far, which I don't think realistically is going to happen because when it comes to quarterback, people freak out, they panic, and someone's going to trade up to try to grab him. If he drops even to like 10, I think you can see a scenario where someone's going to jump up and grab him. But if for some miracle of a reason he's still on the board, what do the Patriots do here to replace Tom Brady?
Yeah, well, that's the biggest thing. I think quarterback's their biggest need. I don't think Jordan Stidham is the answer. I don't think he's the future. I think that the New England Patriots were able to move on from Tom Brady because they have their eye on a guy here at 23 and or they move up and get someone. But in this scenario, I think they go after Justin Herbert here. I do think they take him off the board. 6'6", 230, an incredibly impressive arm. Size, he's actually a lot more mobile than people think of for that size, so extremely athletic. And he can kind of make all the throws. He's got a good fastball when he really needs to put it in there, but he can really change up his, the velocity of the football. The only thing and this is kind of the reason that I am personally a little hesitant on Justin Herbert, other than the fact that he went to Oregon, but he doesn't improvise well. He's kind of a guy that I'd call him kind of robo quarterback. Very robotic, right? I mean, everything has to kind of be sketched out and be set up perfect. Now, in saying that, Tom Brady wasn't the most mobile guy and didn't really improvise that well either, right? I mean, all the throws just always seem to be there. So I'm not saying it's not impossible, but if there's a fit for Justin Herbert, I do think New England is the best schematic fit for him. So I think this is a no-brainer when this came up in our mock draft.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Can I just say about
go ahead, Pastel.
I'll say the one thing about Justin Herbert, and the reason I think a lot of people in this show don't like him, is every quarterback we talked about previous to this has the ability to raise their team up to a different level. Maybe not on a consistent basis, but you look at Justin Herbert and you watch him throughout the last 3 years in college football, he never raised his team to a different level. He was just always there, throwing good stats, nothing too crazy, nothing too bad, just never raised his team up. And I think that's where we have a lot of problems with Justin Herbert being picked in the top 20.
I would think Oregon fans would argue with you in saying they just won a Rose Bowl. So, and I get
phenomenal team.
They were a good team, so I get that. For me, that's not the case. Like, I still think he was a really good quarterback, but I just don't. He just doesn't have the wow factor for me, right? Yeah. And I think that's what you're talking about, Pastel. There is no wow factor with him.
He doesn't. I don't think he has the ceiling the other quarterbacks have. That's the biggest thing. I think all the quarterbacks we've picked prior have a little bit of a higher ceiling than Herbert, in my opinion. I think with Herbert, it's kind of he's just vanilla. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think
maybe it's the personality. I think it's the personality. Maybe the personality that just gets to me. I don't know.
No, I think that definitely plays a role in it. It's not that he's a good guy, but he doesn't bring that leadership factor to the table that some of these other quarterbacks do. And I think for a guy that no one on the show is that high on. We've spent way too much time on him. So let's go ahead and move on.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's go to number 24.
Good point.
And realistically, there's no way he's on the board at 23.
No.
Again, these are guys that, if we were the GMs who we would be taking, and none of us are high on Herbert, so he falls in our draft. So New Orleans at 24, Kenny, another guy that has fallen to this point. He's an offensive tackle. Failed a drug test. Do you think that Mekhi Becton's really going to fall this far?
He could.
I don't know. Yeah, you never know with the failed drug test. I mean, we don't know what he failed the drug test for. So, it's all speculation at this point. I think if he's there at 24, you absolutely pull the trigger. It's one of the best value picks in the draft. Listen, guys, the guy is 6'7", 368 pounds. Like, he's a monster. And you think the guy that big, can he move well? Is he going to be able to move? Guys, he ran a 5'15", 40, and he's a donut shy of 400 pounds. Like, that's ridiculous. So he's clearly athletic. The biggest problem, I think, the biggest concern about the next level is he going to play too tall? Is he going to lose out on a lot of leverage situations? When I look at film, my gut says no, because he's pancaking a lot of dudes in the college level with one arm. Like, he's just an absolute behemoth. So I think at 24, it's a no-brainer. He's the best player available on the board, and he's the biggest value pick up to this point I think we've seen so far.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on. We have Minnesota. They have 2 first-round picks, and they have 2 glaring needs. And I think, Pastel, you took the cornerback, so I think here they have to go receiver. They might take receiver with their first pick. I guess it depends how the board falls to them, but they got to replace Stephon Diggs. They got to find that production somewhere, as hard as that's going to be to do. And we've talked over and over about the depth of the wide receiver class here. So if they do wait for their 25th pick to take a receiver, the way that our board has fallen, I have them taking Denzel Mims, the wide receiver out of Baylor. I think if in this area here, I'm not sure Jefferson's going to be there, probably not. If Jefferson's there, T. Higgins, who Gless picked earlier, or Mims. Ayuk out of Arizona is another interesting fit for the offense, but I think Mims, he's very similar to Justin Jefferson in terms of not a burner, but he ran a sub 4.4, so he's not slow by any means. A lot faster than all of us, that's for sure. But he has a good catch radius. He's good at going up and getting the ball. I think he'd be a nice complement to Thielen on the outside. So I think in this slot they may pick a wide receiver with their first pick. If they don't, they're definitely going wide receiver here. And I have them taking Denzel Mims, a wide receiver out of Baylor. And what do you know? Pastel at the 26th pick has Miami again. I am now convinced that you're just trying to screw with me. Pastel, who do you have? You've already screwed up our draft. Why don't you just
second running back, J.K. Dobbins.
Second running back.
No, I think at this point you get a guy like Yatir Gross-Matos from Penn State, and at this point his potential is a top 10 talent. He's a 6'5", freakish athlete who had 10 sacks this past year for Penn State. Little shout out, he's from our high school, Chancellor High School over in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Chancellor U.
But let's be honest, Miami's defense, they have holes everywhere. So just pick the best talent, the best player on the board at this point, and that's Yatir Gross-Matos.
Yeah, they did a lot of work in free agency to shore up the defense. They did bring in Shaq Lawson at defensive end. I think they could use some depth to add at the defensive line. But I think they're going to go heavy, in my opinion, they're going to go heavy offense, especially in the first round with the 3 draft picks. So I think they're probably going to go quarterback at 5 and then offensive tackle, maybe both picks offensive tackle. If a wide receiver falls at 18, they could go there. But I think it's a solid pick. I'm not going to complain about it, Pastel, but if they are going to take a running back in the first round, if they just have to do it, I think it's going to be here at 26. But please don't do it at 18. I hope no one in the Dolphins organization is watching this video.
I hope they pick him next week.
I wouldn't mind if they pick him, but not at 18 for crying out. And I hear they really like J.K. Dobbins. But anyways, let's move on. All right, Gless, you got Seattle. Who do you have Seattle taking with the 27th pick?
Yeah, here, they need defensive help, and specifically on the defensive line. Not a very good pass rush team last year, very low sack numbers. And even when you watch the game, quarterback's just getting way too comfortable back there. So I think they take the best pass rusher on the board. K'Lavon Chason out of LSU. Now, interesting thing about this guy, this guy's generally Seattle likes to take guys like this, where his measurables and his skill set and everything that you see in practice is off the charts. His mobility, his burst off the line. His biggest knock was his actual production in college. Not a very productive player at LSU, but his talent level and his skill level is just off the charts. So I think Pete Carroll and the Seattle Brass see that, and I think they take him with really an effort of creating an elite pass rusher, because he certainly has the tools. So I think they help their pass rush ability here. They take Chase on here at 27.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to number 28. We have the Baltimore Ravens. Kenny, what do you see the Ravens doing with this pick?
I have the Ravens picking probably my favorite player in the draft, and that's Kenneth Murray. I love this guy. I love the film on him. He is an absolute production machine. He's 6'2", 235, inside linebacker. And if you watch his clips, if you watch his highlights, he's always around the football, always. He led the Big 12 in tackles 2 years in a row. He had 17 tackles for loss this year, 12 and a half the year before. He had four sacks the last 2 years. He's just always around the football. He is a hyper productive player. Now, obviously, inside linebacker is not a premium position like it used to be, but he's a 3-down linebacker. He's not going to leave the field. He's great in the run game. He can cover. He's not a liability in zone or in man. I think he's an all-around great player, and I think he's someone who's going to anchor that Baltimore defense, that vaunted Baltimore defense, for the next 10 to 12 years, 10 to 15 years. He's a stud, in my opinion.
All right, let's move to 29, and the Tennessee Titans are on the clock. I have them going offense here, guys. Jack Conklin, offensive tackle. He left for the Cleveland Browns earlier this offseason, creating a huge void at the right tackle position. So I have him going with tackle Austin Jackson out of USC. This guy's upside is ridiculous. He may have the most upside of any tackle in the draft. He is one of the more raw tackles in terms of his technical talent. He needs to work on his hand placement. Sometimes he kind of lunges, he gets off balance, off the line of scrimmage, but there's a ton to work with. That is frame of 6'5", 322 pounds. He reminds me, guys, a lot of Tyrone Smith, the tackle that came out of USC a few years back and now is one of the best tackles in the league for the Dallas Cowboys. So I think the upside here is just too good to pass up. He's very quick off the ball. He's nimble on his feet. He's able to get off the line and kind of create those good angles when taking on defenders. And he's very effective in the running game, which I think would go perfectly with Tennessee. So with that athletic frame, he can build on that. But I think the upside here, you got to go tackle. And so far from what I see on our board, Austin Jackson is the one with the most upside. So I go with him here at 29. Let's go ahead and move on to number 30. The Green Bay Packers are on the clock. Pastel, what do you see the Packers doing?
For Green Bay, I think you're looking at somebody. I think a lot of fans probably want to see wide receiver here, but with the way the board fell, I think you get somebody that can just shore up that defensive line with the liking of Ross Blakelock, defensive tackle from TCU. And you go back and look at his film. He's one of those guys that you compare kind of like an Aaron Donald or a Geno Atkins from like my Cincinnati Bengals. They just have an incredible burst off that defensive line. And if it wasn't for an Achilles injury in 2018, I think he's a top 20 pick in this draft. But he did have a very productive junior year this past year. So I think he was able to recover from that Achilles injury. I think he's a great pick for Green Bay here, just not a sexy pick.
All right, moving on. Number 31, San Francisco 49ers are on the clock. Bless, what's San Fran going to do with this pick?
Yeah, I think the rich get richer here, guys. Some needs in the back end of the secondary. So I'm actually going to take the first safety in our mock draft. I'm going to take the Jim Thorpe Award winner, 2009, and Grant Delpit. I absolutely love this player. His versatility is unmatched. Two-time All-American. He was a unanimous All-American this year. But guys, his versatility is unmatched in this draft as far as the back end is concerned. You can play him on a slot receiver. He can match up with the tight end. He can play deep center field. Incredibly physical player. He can play in the box. The only hesitation that teams may have about taking him is his tackling. 2018, he had a really rough year, gave up a lot of whiffs in the secondary. 2019 was obviously a lot better about it since he was the Jim Thorpe Award winner. This dude is an absolute stud, though. A lot of NFL comparison passed out to your boy, Eric Berry is what a lot of teams are comparing him to. So, I mean, if you can tell me, if you tell John Lynch and the San Francisco Brass, you can get a guy like Eric Berry at 31, they're absolutely going to take him here. So I think it's great value for them.
Best safety in a safety class that is not as stellar as, other years, but I could see him going a little before this actually. There's some teams like the Cowboys who I picked for. I could see them if they're not liking any of the cornerbacks that are coming to them on the board, I could see them going with Delpit there, but it's a good pick, Gless, to shore up the secondary for San Francisco. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say just secondary in general in this draft is a little it's lackluster, aside from Acuna going at 3. I mean, a lot of these guys, they were good college players, but I wouldn't say that they were, that they're going to be these incredible corners here in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's kind of a lackluster secondary draft, but I think Delpit from the safety position is the best one.
I think overall it's a very offensive heavy draft, in my opinion. Yep. But let's go ahead and move to 32, rounding out our first round. The Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Kenny, you are scooping up all the linebackers here. So what do you have Kansas City doing?
I know. I have them taking Patrick Queen, linebacker from LSU. And Gless, I was all dead set on taking Grant Delpit with this pick. And it's funny you mentioned Eric Berry, because I was like, look, they released Eric Berry at the beginning of beginning of last year or this year, and then now they get to replace him with an Eric Berry clone and Grant Delpit. But it was just a picture. But I didn't move far. I went from one LSU player to the next, and I took Patrick Queen. So I think Patrick Queen's a great pick here. He's kind of raw. He's really only had 1 year as the starter, and that was this year. But he did well. He had 12 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 1 pick. He showed a knack for getting to the football and always being around. He's 6'1", 227, so he's a little undersized, but I think he's still a 3-down linebacker. He has the potential to be a 3-down linebacker. I worry about how well he'll do in the run game and how well he'll do at shedding blocks when they get to the second level. But I think it's still a great pick. And by the way, if you're confused who won the national championship this year, just look at who we have the most picks for in the first round. This is the 6th LSU player.
Of them, right?
This is the 6th LSU player we have going in the first round, which tells you that they were an absolute factory this year. That's the kind of talent that team had. But I think to round out the first round, Kansas City needs help on defense. Their offense is obviously stellar enough. I think that would be more of a luxury pick at this point. I think they take the best linebacker on the board, Patrick Queen, here at 32.
So there you have it. Our first round is complete. The marathon of the first round. I'm so glad I'm not a general manager, man. What a tough job that is. It's nice to be able to, do a mock draft and not have any of the responsibility of having to take the heat if players we pick don't work out. And just remember, guys, obviously this doesn't have trades involved, and I think we're going to see a decent amount of trades. It'll be interesting though with how the draft is set up this year, all remotely, how difficult it's going to be for teams to set trades up and be able to do it within the time frame that they're given to make their pick. So it's going to be a very weird setup. So we're all going to be having to adjust.
Do you think we're going to hear a lot of confirmed?
I sure hope
the
not.
NFL draft.
I sure hope not. Kenny's referring to the XFL draft where everyone said confirmed, and I had it in my dreams for like months.
Confirmed.
Afterward, confirmed. We'll see. Hopefully they don't have any technical issues. Hopefully everyone has some solid Verizon Fios at their homes. But so I want to hear from everyone watching. Who do you want your favorite NFL team to take? Put it in the comment section below and let us know how you see the NFL draft playing out for your favorite NFL team.
What's up, football fans? This is Coach Gless. Want to know how to listen to all of our segments on the go? You can subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform today. And don't forget to rate us and give us that 5-star review.